This is Tony Barge, doing what's vital to the title of a workplace expert. I'm your host with the most from all coast. Your next move is your best move. Make sure you hit that like button. Like I said, your next move is your best move. Make sure you hit that like button. You understand me? Good. We're going to start with a short story that really ties into the message today. Um, this particular message was this particular story really kind of shaped and revolutionized me within the talent acquisition and talent management industry. This really gave me the fire and desire because it let me know that what I was doing in this industry. I was ultimately changing lives, saving lives, and making a difference in many people's lives. And that's, quite frankly, that's what life is really about, right? Good. At least that's what I think life is about. So I follow my life purpose and I follow my life mission. So I received a message from my admin, Mary Garcia. It was a Friday. I had just finished teaching new hires. I had a class of new hires, let them go early. Just finished teaching them. My assistant, Mary, sends me over a message of a prospective client, called me just that Friday. So I said, should I call him Monday or should I call him Friday? It seemed anytime a client calls on Friday, it's always something very important. So I said, let me reach out. But before I reach out, let me do some homework. I did some homework on the client. And I noticed on the website that his profile picture, he looked just like Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean, which was my grandmother's favorite comedian of all times. This Mr. Bean would literally make her laugh to the point to where she would cry. So this guy already had instant rapport with me because he looked like my grandmother's favorite comedian. So I said, let me call Mr. Bean. For the sake of this video, we're going to call him Mr. Bean because he actually did talk like Mr. Bean. He looked like Mr. Bean. He even walked like Mr. Bean when I went later to meet with him. So for the purpose of the story, his name is Mr. Bean. So I called Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean, we spoke on the phone for about an hour and a half. He really broke down he actually literally broke down. He broke down. He started crying because you could tell he was frustrated. He was irritated. He was hurt because his company wasn't reaching the goals that he had normally been reaching. He was even a possibility that his company might be going out of business. So he was really frazzled. He's really shooken up about this situation. So I said, tell me more. Tell me more. So he got to telling me more, and it was causing a lot of sleepless nights, and he just couldn't get his handle on this turnover situation that was happening within his company, and that's why he was calling me. And so, I told him, I said, you know what your problem is? I said, you can't win today's ball game with yesterday's score. You need a new score. You know what I mean? He said, what do you mean? I said, you can't win today's ball game with yesterday's score. You need a new score. I said, what's the opposite of being proactive? He said, reactive. I said, that's exactly what you're doing right now. You're being reactive, and we need to take more of a proactive approach in order to solve your hiring situation, your high turnover situation. He said, okay. He said, what do we need to do? I said, we need to set up an hour consultation. I need to get all your hiring authorities, your decision makers on a teleconference and ask them the 21 questions. He said, okay, well, that sounds good. He said, even better, I'm going to fly you here to San Francisco and you can meet with them personally. I said, okay, let's do that. Well, so we coordinated, we facilitated and negotiated everything. I flew to San Francisco. And I told him, I said, look at me as your trusted advisor, as the Equalizer. And he said, what do you mean? Like the Equalizer Robert McCall with Denzel Washington, or the Robert McCall Edward Woodward? I said both. I got all their strengths but none of their weakness. So we kind of chuckled at that. I always believe conversation rules the nation. You got to have a good conversation with somebody in order to do business. If I can't have a good conversation with you, we sure can't do business together. So, but we had a real good rapport, me and Mr. Bean. And some of the things that I solved the problem. The moral of the story is I solved the problem, with this exact message I'm about to prescribe to you. I had to sit down, ask them the 21 questions, dissect, diagnose, and do a proper diagnostic of the problem in order to get to the meat and potatoes of the solution, to be that equalizer. And the moral of the story is the best, like the Chinese proverb states, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And you got to always remember, you can't win today's ball game with yesterday's score. You need a new score. So let's dive right into the lesson for the day. And it is real quick, fast, in a hurry. Your hiring process is causing high turnover. Turnover is inevitable. New talent flows in and old talent flows out. That's a part of the healthy life cycle of any organization. But for some companies, turnover stops being a healthy process and becomes a serious situation. If employees stay with the company for a while and move on when time to take the next step in the career, that's one thing. But if your organization is struggling to reach its goals because crucial positions keep turning up vacant, you have a major problem on your hands. Plenty of causes can contribute to a high turnover rate. For the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on the causes that have to do with hiring process, just like my client, Mr. Bean. If your company is suffering from high turnover on the account of a broken hiring process, it's likely that you're not dealing with at least one of these problems. And the first problem is you don't understand what you need in a candidate. Let me repeat that again. Like I said, you don't understand what you need in a candidate. You know what I'm saying? If you want to hit the bullseye, you need a target to aim at. Unfortunately, many organizations fail to define the core competency and the personality traits the right candidate will have. Other companies do define these competency and traits, but they get greedy, setting requirements so high so no candidate can realistically fulfill them. Whenever you begin a new hiring process, draw your bullseye. Take some time to define what skills, values, and personality traits a candidate will need to get the job done. That way you will be able to recognize the right candidate when you have found them in the labor force. Second problem, your decision makers just hire candidates they like most. Once you set the requirements for your candidates, you need to stick to those requirements. This is easier said than done. Your interviewers are only human, and the natural thing to do for them is when making a hiring decision is to pick the candidate who was most charming. That makes sense, but that's not their job. Their job is to find candidates who are most capable of fulfilling the requirements of the position. This is why it's a good idea to make the interviewing process as objective as possible. Like I said, as objective as possible. For example, you could have all your interviewers rate how well each candidate fulfilled each of the requirements. This gives you a more objective way to evaluate your candidates than simply judging them off first impression. Third, your interviewers aren't asking the right questions. Like I said, your interviewers are not asking the right questions. And let me break that down for you even further. You know what I'm saying? So you know exactly what I am saying. If you're going to make the hiring process as objective as possible, you're going to need to ensure that the question your interviews ask give candidates a chance to demonstrate how well they meet the role requirements. You know what I mean? Behavioral-based questions are good for this purpose. These questions ask candidates to describe actions that they've taken in the past, and the idea being that the best way to predict future behavior is by looking at past behavior. If you're interviewing for an accounting position, for example, you could ask something like, tell us about a time you solved a problem in accounting. Then the fourth and final step, you haven't made timely hiring priority. You haven't made timely hiring a priority. You know what I'm saying? It's easy for decision makers to stretch out the hiring process by asking for more interviews. They often do this when they are more concerned about avoiding the wrong decision than they are with making the right decision. Hiring authorities worry about what might happen to them if they make a hiring decision that goes badly. So they just stall as long as they can. The problem with this is the longer you wait to make a hire, the greater odds the best candidates in your pipeline will already be found a new opportunity. When decision makers stretch out the hiring process, they are virtually ensuring that your organization won't get top quality hires. If you're struggling with your high turnover, and the hiring process is the first place you should look to find that cause. A faulty hiring process often leads to hires who are a poor fit for your position, and these bad fits will unlikely stay for the long term. If after trying these above tips and you're still experiencing high turnover, you may want to bring in a third party recruiting firm like my company, for example. The right recruiting firm can help you with hiring problems in the short run and advise you on how to set up a working hiring process for the future. In conclusion, your hiring process is causing high turnover. Apply this right information to bring restoration to your high turnover situation. I hope you never want as long as you live and you live as long as you want. And I love you guys. You have a fabulous day.